What about the fentanyl stuff? I mean, another. I mean, they just have so many angles. It seems I can't think of anything left. I mean, they're just hitting us from every direction. And so with the fentanyl stuff, they're shipping all the supplies into Mexico to make the fentanyl to these cartels. Not only are they doing that, they're sending in chemists to teach the cartels how to make the world's most potent fentanyl. Now they're already teaching these guys what the next drug is. So we went through heroin, now we're in fentanyl, and now they're teaching the cartels how to make the next most deadliest drug, which is gonna be worse than fentanyl, if you can even believe that.
Yeah, right. So this is one of those areas where it's important to understand that autocracies, autocratic nations, Russia, Iran, China, anything's possible based on who you know. So organized crime in an autocracy looks very different than organized crime in a democracy. Because organized crime in a democracy has to learn to operate under multiple layers of police enforcement. Municipal police, district police, state police, federal police, right? All these different layers they have to operate under. So they generally can't do big operations, and they generally don't get to move large amounts of money because it's very hard. In an autocracy, they don't have multiple layers of police force. They basically have one main police chief or one main police governing agent who's in charge of multiple precincts. So they just have to have that one person on the payroll, or they just have to be an old friend from school, or they just have to have some way of basically bypassing that one level of police enforcement. And then once they've got that, they can do pretty much anything they want. They can move large quantities of goods. They can deal with large quantities of money. And they can do it all because it's essentially sanctioned by the state because of the corruption that exists, because of the way that the Communist Party the autocratic party is organized. Oligarchs, governors, commissioners, that kind of thing. So the fact that there is or maybe Chinese scientists and Chinese individuals supporting the drug trade in South America doesn't necessarily mean that the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, is enabling that to happen or encouraging or directing that happens, as much as it could just mean that an organized crime syndicate is able to manage that level of operation because they don't have to go through a democracy to get there.
Do you think it's an organized crime entity?
I would imagine that is more. I feel like it's higher probability that's a criminal effort than an organized state effort. If it was an organized state effort, I wouldn't see them doing it with Chinese people in South America. I would see a cutout nation in between, right? They would have Chinese scientists working with Cambodians, or Chinese scientists working with Mali, right, to pass the knowledge through a third location, so that by the time they actually get close to the United States, we're not looking at Chinese scientists, we're looking at scientists of some other nationality, right? It's a cutout, like a shell, to protect and give plausible deniability to the Chinese. If it was nationally sanctioned or sanctioned by the government, that's how they would go through hiding their hand. That's what I would do again. If you or I was going to run an underground criminal network, we would put layers in place to protect our involvement. That's just how mature operations work. Everything happening here does not sound like a mature operation. It sounds criminal.
Interesting. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to believe at this point. It's everything happens. It seems like nowadays everything just happens right in broad daylight.
It does.
Nobody's hiding anything anymore. It's just right out in the open.
And it frustrates me because
the most difficult countries you can play in Supremacy 1914. When you start a new match in Supremacy,
it's just right out in the open.
And it frustrates me because things have always happened, but we used to be able to count on certain professions to give us vetted information. Journalistic information was supposed to be one of those areas that we could rely on. But the professional journalistic practice has almost all but died right now. So the articles that you and I read on a day-to-day basis, they aren't written by journalists. They might be written by individuals who went to school for journalism, but they're not being written by individuals who have had the time to apply journalistic principles to the story that they're writing.
Yeah.
They have to get something out. They have to get it out now. They need people to click on it so that their editor-in-chief can see that people are clicking on their story and they can keep their job. That's what we're looking at now. So these headlines get spread when the content in the article doesn't even support the headline. These speculative accusations get spread, and you and I don't know any better. We grew up in a house. I remember my dad saying you could trust the newspaper. You can't trust the newspaper anymore. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I read this awesome article recently talking about the difference between print journalism or print news media and digital news media, meaning print media is all media, all news media that exists in print. It may also exist digitally, but it exists in print. And the difference between that and news that exists only in a digital format. And the article was talking about how journalistic behaviors, journalistic discipline is starting to be applied more rigorously in digital products only, vice print products only. Because if you make a mistake in a print product, you can't retract it. If you do, it makes a big public mess because the whole world knows that the Wall Street Journal has to retract that article and change it. Digital, they just update the file, right? Today it says 41 people dead. As soon as better information comes in, they update it. 11 people dead. You can't do that with print media. So as a result, there's more digital news providers, exclusively digital news providers, who are starting to actually apply proper journalistic practice because they get the best of both worlds. They get the story out fast, but they can also continue to vet the facts and update the story for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, so that what goes on to live in permanent record is finished, accurate journalistic content.
Okay. What about all the influence coming into this country?